Well, hello everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of Thirsty Thursday. My name is Tommy Hensel, and tonight I'm going to be sharing with you my favorite gin-based cocktail and sharing some wine tips as well. So thank you for tuning in, and if you're tuning in later, thank you for tuning in later. I want to make sure that I pop this up on the screen. Please make sure you go into YouTube and subscribe to my channel. My channel youtube.com/Tommy Hensel, my name, all one word. So very easy to remember. So tonight, I'm going to be, as I said, showing you a cocktail, but at first I want to give you a couple of wine tips. I've been giving tips over the last few weeks about different aspects of pairing wine, and last week I talked about wine serving temperatures. Tonight I want to talk about how to store your wine. Now, many people have these lovely things in their kitchen, like wine racks that they put on the counter that are very attractive and decorative. That's probably the worst possible place to store any kind of wine. Wine is very susceptible to heat and cold, but to temperature, but heat primarily, and to bright lights. So in general, here are some tips for how to best store your wine. Now, if you have a wine cellar, you don't need to hear this because you probably already know. And even wine fridges, you need put them in the right place because you don't want them to get a lot of direct sunlight. But in general, here's a couple of things. One, if a wine is a screw top wine, you can store it upright, no problem. If a wine has a cork, you should store it on the side because you want the cork to be in contact with the liquid. If the cork dries out, it might shrink just a little from the bottle, and that will let oxygen into the bottle. And oxygen is one of the great enemies of wine. It will oxidize the wine and eventually it will ruin it. You also want to make sure that wine is kept at a steady temperature in a low light or dark environment. The optimum temperature to store wine is between 50 and 60 degrees Fahrenheit. That's 10 to 15 degrees Celsius. That's the best. Now, most of us don't have a space in our house that stays at that temperature, so you may have to store it a little bit warmer, but frankly, if you can keep it somewhere cool, it's going to help the wine last a lot longer. Definitely don't let wine be in direct sunlight for a long period of time because the sunlight can start to ruin the wine. It will essentially bake the wine and it will start to taste off to you. And also, wine is very susceptible to vibration. So if there's an electronic device or you live near a train track or something that shakes a certain part of your house, try to make sure the wine is not there, so it doesn't get agitated too much. So in general, keep wine in a dark, cool environment, store it on its side. If it has a cork, upright is fine for screw top wines. And there are a lot of amazing screw top wines, by the way. Just because it's got a screw top doesn't mean it's not fine wine. There's some great wines that, and particularly out of Australia and New Zealand, that are coming with screw tops. So just a little hint there. So anyway, those are my tips on how to best store your wine. The kitchen is probably your worst enemy for storing wine because of the huge temperature fluctuations and the brightness, like my kitchen right now, the brightness of most people's kitchens. It's just not going to be good for your wine. Now, for a couple of days, it's fine, but long term, not a good place to store your wine. Also, you could put wine in the refrigerator, but don't keep it in the refrigerator for a super long time because that can also dry out the cork and then you'll get oxidized wine. So there are my tips for storing wine. Now, what I want to talk to you about is my very favorite gin-based cocktail. It's called an Aviation cocktail. Interesting history to the Aviation. It's traced back, most people believe it was invented in about 1916 by a bartender named Hugo Enslin in New York City. He was a German immigrant, worked in some hotels in New York, and published a really comprehensive cocktail book in 1916. So the Aviation traces back to that. And the name comes from sort of a nod to the Wright brothers because flight was such a new, exciting thing at that point that this was kind of his nod to the Wright brothers by naming it an Aviation. It's got 4 ingredients. It has 2 ounces of gin, 3/4 of an ounce of freshly squeezed lemon juice, a 1/2 ounce of Luxardo maraschino liqueur, cherry liqueur, and a 1/4 ounce of creme de violette. This is the ingredient that makes it a special cocktail. Now, interesting story, if you know anything about cocktail history, this cocktail starts getting some traction in New York in 1916, and actually in Europe after that. But in 1920, in January, the Volstead Act started prohibition in in the United States. January 16th was the day that that officially went into action. So alcohol was prohibited. And the Volstead Act was not repealed until December the 5th, 1933. So for about 13 or 14 years, alcohol was outlawed in the United States. So when it came back and cocktails came back, this cocktail appeared in a recipe book in the 1930s, but without the creme de violette, because this was kind of an obscure liqueur, even in the teens. I mean, it was popular in Europe, but not so much in the United States. And with all those years of prohibition, when cocktails started coming back, this ingredient was gone in the United States. It was made in Europe, but it was not in the United States. So from that point forward, you might see Aviations listed in some cocktail books from the 30s and 40s and 50s, but it will eliminate this ingredient. So it'll just be gin, lemon juice, and Luxardo. Diesel, but not an Aviation. In 2007, there was a man in Minneapolis, I believe, who imported this for the very first time since Prohibition started in 1920. So starting in 2007, creme de violette comes back. This cocktail starts to gain some traction, and now you'll see it on almost every craft cocktail menu in the country with a lot of riffs on it as well. In fact, I had a really good one that was a mezcal-based version of this instead of gin. But anyway, that's sort of the little backstory of the Aviation cocktail. I'm going to flip over here to brand. If anybody has any questions, please type them to me. So I'm going to start. First, I am using my favorite brand of gin. This is an unusual brand. It's called Empress 1908. It's made in Canada. It's named after the Empress Hotel in Vancouver. And what I love about this is after the gin is made, they steep butterfly pea blossoms in the gin, and it gives it that beautiful indigo color. And that, in conjunction with a little bit of purple that you get from the creme de violette, sort of hypes up the color of this cocktail. But it's also, there's a cool kind of science experiment thing that I want to show you with the gin. But first, I'm going to grab my cocktail shaker, which has been chilling. And I'm going to start with the two smaller ingredients. What you'll notice is it's got 3/4 of an ounce of lemon juice and then 3/4 of an ounce of these two sweet ingredients combined. So it's evenly balanced. This is not a cocktail to eyeball and just pour. You have to measure this cocktail because otherwise you cannot achieve the balance. So I'm going to do a 1/2 ounce of Luxardo. So that's a 1/2 ounce. I'm going to put the top back on it. And a 1/4 ounce of the creme de violette. I measured this out and discovered that the cap is a 1/4 ounce. So there we go. There we go. Creme de violette. Now, we want to put in 3/4 of an ounce of lemon juice. I just squeezed these lemons a little while ago. So I'm going to spoon that in until we get 3/4 of an ounce. Come on. There we go. 3/4 of an ounce of lemon juice. Now, I have pre-measured the 2 ounces of gin in this champagne flute, just so you can see this interesting experiment happen. I'm trying to move it in a way that you can see. There we go. So I've got the lemon juice. Now, what you're going to notice is that the butterfly pea blossoms act kind of like litmus paper. In the presence of acid, they will change color. Suddenly it's pink. So that's a really interesting, just fun thing. So, to show the kids. I can't drink it, but there you go. So that's the 3/4 of an ounce of lemon juice and 2 ounces of gin. In my case, the Empress 1908 gin. Alrighty. Now, as I've said in other cocktail demos, this is a cocktail you shake. You stir cocktails that have no fruit juice in them, and you shake cocktails that have fruit juice in them in order to emulsify the ingredients. So give it a good shake. All right. And I'm using a traditional coupe. I'm garnishing with my favorite Luxardo cherries. And there you have it, my friends. The Aviation cocktail made with Empress 1908 gin. You can see the magnificent color. I'm putting it with a little white behind it. This is a beautifully balanced cocktail. And like I said before, the fact that it has equal parts of the sweet to the tart helps keep the balance. Let me give it a taste. Oh yeah. I'm feeling, sometimes I'll flip the ingredients and do a ½ ounce of the creme de violette and a ¼ ounce of Luxardo. It's just a matter of personal preference and taste. What you want to make sure you keep is the balance of sweet to tart the same. And then 2 ounces of any kind of dry gin that you like. I love Empress 1908, but any gin will do. If you make it with regular gin, which has no color, obviously, then you won't get this vibrant purple. You'll get a little bit more of a grayed down lavender color, but it's still a beautiful cocktail. So that is my take on the classic Aviation cocktail. I'm just going to check and see if I have any comments or questions over here. And if not, I don't. Please, if you have any questions, send me a note. And if you need the recipe, I'll be happy to send it to you. But it's really simple. 2 ounces of gin, ½ ounce of Luxardo, ¼ ounce of creme de violette, 3/4 of an ounce of lemon, shake, and serve it up in a chilled coupe. And of course, garnish with Luxardo cherries, because why not? Luxardo cherries make everything better. So there we have it. So thank you, my friends. I'm going to sign off for the evening and drink this cocktail. Please tune in on Tuesdays for Tasty Tuesdays, where I do cooking demos, and of course on Thirsty Thursdays, where I demonstrate cocktails and give you tips about wine. So without further ado, I'm going to sign off for the evening, and I hope to see you on Tuesday and Thursday of next week. So let's go. Thanks, everybody.